Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. So we're reading from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya-lila, chapter 3. Lord Chaitanya at the house of Advaita Acharya. Before we begin reading Chaitanya Charitamrita, I would like to ask the permission and blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis, especially senior devotees, disciples of Srila Prabhupada, His Holiness Prabhupada Maharaj, Lamat Prabhu, Yadobar Prabhu, and others. Feels like sitting for an exam in their presence. I think I already failed the first part, singing the bhajan. So we're reading from the 3rd chapter, verse 71. It's on the whiteboard. Acharya kahe chada tumi apana churi. Acharya kahe chada tumi apana churi. Ami sab jani tomara sanyasir vara bhuri. Ami sab jani tomara sanyasir vara bhuri. Acharya kahe chada tumi apana churi. Ami sab jani tomara sanyasir vara bhuri.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Ami sabajani kamara sanyasera bari buri.
Ami sabajani kamara sanyasera bari buri.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Ami sabajani kamara sanyasera bari buri.
Ami sabajani kamara sanyasera bari buri.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Ami sabajani tomara sanyasera bari puri.
Ami sabajani tomara sanyasera bari puri.
Vaishnavis.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Ami sabajani tomara sanyasera bari puri.
Ami sabajani tomara sanyasera bari puri.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Acharya kahe chada tumi apanara churi.
Abi sanajani tomara sanyasera bari buri.
Ami sabajani tomara sanyasera bari puri.
Word for word. Acharya kahe. Advaita Acharya replied. Chada, give up. To me, you. Apanara, of yourself. Churi, the concealment. Ami, I. Saba, all. Jani, no. Tamara, of you. Sanyasira, of the acceptance of the renounced order. Bhari Bhuri, the confidential meaning. Translation and purpose by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation: when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did not accept the food that had already been served, Advaita Acharya said, "Please give up your concealment. I know who you are. and I know the confidential meaning of your accepting the sannyas order. There is no purport by Srila Prabhupada to this verse, but we could cite Srila Prabhupada's explanation from elsewhere that in Chaitanya Charitamrita that for great devotees such as Advaita Acharya, even though he is the Lord himself, him and Nityananda Prabhu, it's a unique situation. I have three personalities of Godhead assembling together to take prasadam. And even before Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu revealed himself as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he directed his Yogamaya to hide or conceal his actual nature, his actual position, when he was a small child, a toddler, Vishwambar, whenever he would come to the audience of Advaita Acharya, when he would recite Srimad Bhagavatam in the presence of other devotees of Navadvip, even though nobody knew that Lord Chaitanya was the Supreme Personality of Godhead who had come to respond to the prayers of Advaita Acharya, still, as Srila Prabhupada explains and Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, even though they didn't know intellectually that he was the Lord, but their heart would go out to him, and they would always be mesmerized by his beauty, and they would feel the same attraction to that little boy, Lord Chaitanya Vishwambar, as to Krishna himself. And Advaita Acharya, that left Advaita Acharya wondered, why do I feel the same kind of spiritual, transcendental happiness seeing this little child? When he would come stumbling into the audience and he would pull on his brother's clothes to ask him to go back home for lunch. So Advaita Acharya now, of course, he reveals his inner understanding of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission. And elsewhere again, as Lord Chaitanya was about to wrap up his pastimes in this world, Advaita Acharya served him by presenting an official excuse to wind up his lila. He sent him a cryptic message that nobody could understand except Advaita Acharya and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Lord Chaitanya read that. I think Srila Prabhupada translates that word as sonnet, S-O-N-N-E-T, sonnet. And he read that confidential message by Advaita Acharya, who said, well, there is no buyers anymore for rice, so we can pack up and go, basically. And they were seeing confidentially discussing somewhere in a remote and private place, and nobody knew what they were discussing. So Advaita Acharya here says, well, I know who you are. I know who you are, I know the confidential meaning of your accepting the sannyas order, so please give up your decorum of a sannyasi, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, as His Holiness Prahalananda Maharaj explained in his 2 classes on Chaitanya Charitamrita last week. He explained how Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to the house of Advaita Acharya, and he also, I really like the point Maharaj made last time about how we should also accept prasadam in Krishna consciousness, and he said that was the hardest part, to take prasadam in Krishna consciousness. Now we're in for some lessons on how to take prasadam, and some surprising lessons as well, because Nityananda Prabhu again breaks away from the tradition of accepting prasadam. As Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu shows his own example, he sits down calmly. First he thinks that those huge quantities of prasadam served were not meant for them. They were meant for Krishna, but then Advaita Acharya says, actually it's for you. And Lord Chaitanya says, no, I cannot take so much prasadam. Sannyasi, that's he's just a newly minted sannyasi, you could say. He just accepted the sannyas order. And as we could see in our movement, when a devotee accepts sannyas, then he visibly follows the rigors of sannyas ashram, and he makes sure that he follows everything correctly, carries his danda around and behaves in a certain way, speaks in a certain way, attends all morning programs. All of us are supposed to attend morning programs and behave properly, but that devotee makes a deliberate effort to show the proper behavior of a sannyasi. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is also behaving as an ideal sannyasi. Srila Prabhupada explains in many of his classes that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna who came. He is Krishna who came to show us the proper example of a human being. And he was ideal in all respects. He was an ideal son, except for a few incidents when he would throw a transcendental tantrum in the house of Mother Shachi. But again, out of his love for her, he was an ideal husband. Srila Prabhupada said that he was very serious with his wife, very respectful, very affectionate, but also very serious. He would never joke with her. And he said the only joke Lord Chaitanya spoke to his wife, Vishnupriya, was when something was missing in the house and Mother Shachi was looking for that item. He asked Lord Chaitanya if he knew where it was. He said maybe Vishnupriya took it. That was the only joke he ever spoke in the relationship with his wife. But then he was an ideal sannyasi. And just recently I was listening to Srila Prabhupada's class, and he said Lord Chaitanya was so strict as a sannyasi, he would never let any lady to come close and offer him obeisances or respect. They were supposed to do that from a distance. And as a sannyasi, he was ideal in his sense control and restraint. And now he shows a proper example of a sannyasi. But Advaita Acharya tells him, okay, we know who you are. There's no one to report you to the sannyasa ministry if you eat a little more than you're supposed to. And please, I know who you are. You're Krishna himself. And of course, as we know, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, taking prasadam and also distributing prasadam and sharing prasadam, appreciating prasadam, is one of the pivots of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. As we were remembering with Krishna Kirtan Prabhu recently, when you extract the essence of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, the most prominent topic of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is that there is a lot of eating going on, practically in every chapter, a lot of descriptions of prasadam. So Lord Chaitanya would make prasadam, taking prasadam and serving prasadam as a pivotal foundation for his exchanges of relationship with his devotees. Sometimes he would take very little prasadam and he would restrain himself so much that all devotees could not tolerate that, and they were all in anxiety and could not find any peace in thinking that Lord Chaitanya was starving himself. Especially when Ramachandra Puri came, and Lord Chaitanya cut down his prasadam intake to 1/4, what he would usually take, something like that.
Yeah.
Half? Oh, okay. And when Ramachandra Puri left, they had a festival. Finally, we're so sorry to see you finally go, as they say. And he left, Lord Chaitanya resumed his regular prasadam intake. And then, of course, on the other end, when devotees from Navadvip would come and from other places, Kulinagram would come and bring something very special, some special items to Lord Chaitanya. And Lord Chaitanya, again, as restrained and self-controlled as sannyasi as he was, he wouldn't accept it, and Govinda would have to store it in a separate room. It wasn't a refrigerated room like we have here. Just a regular room, and prasadam was highly perishable. Milk items, yogurt, and other preparations made of fruit and vegetables. Anything perishes rather quickly in the atmosphere of Bengal. It's very humid and very hot. But surprisingly, those items were stored there for 1 month? And 1 year? Okay. And they wouldn't go bad. But Govinda was feeling a lot of anxiety because of all of Lord Chaitanya's devotees really wanted to hear what Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's response to their offerings was. And they would all come and harass Govinda. And I know how it feels like from having been secretary of some traveling preachers like Niranjana Maharaj. Devotees really want you to make sure that that particular preparation or that particular item is offered to their spiritual master. It has to go through you, and if you dare to stand in the way of their service, it's a very dangerous and very painful situation. So Govinda had to lie to them. He had to lie to them, and he would tell them, well, yes, Lord Chaitanya really liked your preparation especially. Niranjana Maharaj once remarked, it's very dangerous, very risky to single out any particular preparation in the house of someone, some particular yatra, because once you do that, it becomes your official favorite preparation, and then the word goes out and spreads, and wherever you go now, they cook that for you. So he's a very special heart. Glorifying and thanking, appreciating prasadam in such a way doesn't become your official favorite item. Right? So Lord Chaitanya wouldn't accept that, and Govinda had to lie to the devotees. Yes, Lord Chaitanya really liked your sukta or your yogurt or your sweets. But then eventually it got the better of him, and he came to Lord Chaitanya complaining, I cannot take it any longer. Could you do something about it? I cannot lie. And Lord Chaitanya told him, you fool, bring it all. bring it all in. Why are you lamenting? And he ate a roomful of prasadam in one sitting, basically. And then he left what is Raghavera jewelry, that prasadam made by his favorite cook, Raghava Pandit, for the next day, to sample, to savor it separately. So Advaita Acharya tells him, I know who you are. You can eat as much as Lord Jagannath does. Actually, you do that in the temple of Jagannath, so do not give up your pretense, your concealment. Text 72. Bhojankara chada vachana chaturi prabhukahi eta anna kaete napari. Advaita Acharya thus requested Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to eat and give up juggling words. The Lord replied, I certainly cannot eat so much food. Maharaj, with your permission, I'll skip Bengali. Can I just read the translation? Text 73. Advaita Acharya then requested the Lord, even though Srila Prabhupada also remarked that this Bengali is, of course, it's transcendental sound, just like the Sanskrit of Srimad Bhagavatam. It manifests or came from the spiritual world. And just chanting these verses, even without understanding their meanings or even without having proper Bengali pronunciation, is very purifying and spiritually uplifting. Once Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that in the near future, people of the West will learn Bengali to reach Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada said that, but then Prabhupada said, I saved you from that necessity and translated Chaitanya Charitamrita into English. Advaita Acharya then requested the Lord to simply accept the prasada without pretense. If he could not eat at all, the balance could be left on the plate. That's another trick of Advaita Acharya. Verse 74, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, I will not be able to eat so much food, and it's not the duty of a sannyasi to leave remnants. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to Srimad Bhagavatam 11:18-19, Bahir Jalashayam Gatva Tatropaspishya Vagyataha Vibhajya Pavitam Shesham Bhunjite Shesham Ahritam. Whatever sannyasi gets that is edible from a householder's house, he should take outside near some lake or river, and after offering it to Vishnu, Brahma and the sun, 3 divisions, he should eat the entire offering and should not leave anything for others to eat. This is an injunction for sannyasis given in Srimad Bhagavatam. And there are some other injunctions for sannyasis in Srimad Bhagavatam, like they shouldn't accept disciples, they should not take food in one residence, one dwelling. He should accept food after having begged it from 7 houses, from what I remember, like that. So those sannyasi requirements, rules are very strict. But again, in our age, in our movement, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada, sannyasis are empowered to, not as, of course, they're renouncants and ascetics, but mostly they're preachers. And therefore, some principles in their duties are more important than others. And sannyasis are supposed in our movement to encourage devotees, brahmacharis, grihasthas, and vanaprasthas and others in their devotional service. And they sometimes stay in the house for longer than 3 days, or take food from one dwelling rather than from 7 dwellings. And they are allowed to have prasadam with the devotees, with the grihasthas, without having to go outside on the bank of a river or lake. 75. In this connection, Advaita Acharya referred to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's eating at Jagannath Puri. Lord Jagannath and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu are identical. Advaita Acharya pointed out that at Jagannath Puri, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ate 54 times, and each time he ate many hundreds of pots of food. Text 76. And of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also should be remembered. In Madhya-lila, there is a chapter describing Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taking prasadam in the houses of his devotees. And there is a sequence or series of verses in which it is described how Lord Chaitanya felt ecstatic when he would take Lord Jagannath's Mahaprasadam. He explains there that this Jagannath Prasadam is a spiritual substance having been tasted by the Lord and touched by his lips. and he glorifies it as completely spiritual and purifying. Interestingly, there is a chapter in Madhya-lila which is called Lord Chaitanya Tastes the Nectar of Krishna's Lotus Lips. And in that chapter again, both the taste or the transcendental potency and fragrance of prasadam and also the transcendental sound of Krishna's flute are described, because both of them are infused with the same substance. Like they have the same active ingredient. Some medications, for instance, are taken sometimes through the mouth or sometimes through the nose, like for hay fever. Have a spray, nasal spray, and also pills that I have to take sometimes here. This form. So Lord Krishna's flute is a source of transcendental sound which is infused with Krishna's, the nectar of Krishna's lips. The gopis in their Gopi Gita glorify Krishna's flute. They say, Surata Vardhanam, Shoka Nashanam, Svarita Vyanana, Sushtu Chumbitam, Itararaga Vismaranam, Rinam, Vitaraviranaste Dharamritam. Dharamritam means Krishna's, nectar of Krishna's lotus feet, lotus lips, Adhara. And they describe the potency or the influence of the sound of Krishna's flute on those who hear it. They say it's Surata Vardhanam, it increases or develops, strengthens the conjugal feelings in the hearts of those who hear it. Shoka Nashanam, it destroys, Shoka means anxiety and misery. Svarita Vyanana Sushtu Chumbitam, sung or vibrated by Krishna's flute, which is touched by Krishna's, literally kissed by Krishna's lips. Itararaga Vismaranam Nrinam, it's very significant, that line. It says, the sound of Krishna's flute causes one to forget all Itararaga. Itararaga means mundane rasa, mundane relationships or mundane pleasures. Itararaga Vismaranam Nrinam. Vitaravira naste dharamritam. Please extend that nectar of your lips to us. But the same influence is also caused by prasadam, at least in many ways. I do remember when I took prasadam in my life for the first time, and it had such a profound effect on me. And then when I was taught by devotees how to offer prasadam, again, for the first few times it was an experiment for me, because I'm a chemist by education, so studied chemistry, and I learned in my school that we have to stage experiments to prove certain theories, right? So devotees told me that if you offer prasadam to Krishna, offer food to Krishna, then it transforms and becomes spiritual. And I didn't believe it, but I decided to try. And here I am, as a result of that experiment, because it did, even though I had very little faith, if any, the kind of prayer I had at that time, if it could be called a prayer, said, oh Krishna, if you're there at all, I have that apple for you, please accept it. And I didn't let Krishna wait for too long, it was just a few seconds, and then somehow or other I still remember the taste of that apple. It was the most tasteful apple I ever had in my life. So prasadam has that potency to immediately, as Prabhupada sometimes would say, infect one with spiritual desires and aspirations, and becomes a very effective way to prove Krishna's existence to others. In the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord explains to Daksha that of all different forms of the Lord, of his, there is one particular form which is the most important, which is the most self-evident. He said, this is the happiness, that a bliss a devotee feels in his or her heart serving him. This most self-evident form. All other forms we might have some either doubts about or something, but that form, when someone takes prasadam of Krishna or hears Krishna's name from the mouths of his pure devotees, it enters the heart, and before one could even put up his barriers and defense systems, try not to become a devotee, it's too late. Krishna has already gotten inside, snuck inside, and manifested as happiness which one can find no parallels to. Right? And he couldn't help but become a devotee, give it a serious try at least. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was glorifying Jagannath Prasadam and Jagannath Puri as transcendental substance which was touched by Krishna's lotus lips just as his flute is. So they have the same active ingredient, prasadam and Krishna's flute. So Advaita Acharya continues, verse 76. Shri Advaita Acharya said, The amount of food that 3 people can eat doesn't constitute even a morsel for you. In proportion to that, these edibles are not even 5 morsels of food for you. 77. I remember from the description of Chaitanya Charitamrita, from the class of Prabhupada Maharaj, that there's a particular verse, or particular word, Srila Prabhupada rather, he comments on that word. Badayala. All the prepared foods were divided into 3 equal parts, and 1 part was arranged on a metal plate for offering to Lord Krishna. And the word used for arrangement is Badayala. And Prabhupada says in the commentary that Badayala is a very significant, it's a sophisticated word used by the Grihasthas in Bengal. It literally means increases. Whenever we offer something to someone who take it away from us, it decreases. But interestingly, when we offer food to Krishna, it increases. It increases in many ways. It increases in its potency, in its taste, and flavor, and fragrance, right? And it changes completely beyond recognition. Again, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did that with so many other ways of manifesting himself in the hearts and lives of other people, like Harinama Sankirtana, when Maharaja Prataparudra was on the rooftop of his palace, seeing the Lord's devotees for the first time. Lord's devotees came from Navadvip and other places, just like rivers flowing towards the ocean. And he could hear and see from the rooftop of his palace that these devotees were more brilliant, more effulgent than millions of suns. And he couldn't understand who they were. He asked, who was that Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya? He asked him, who are these devotees? They're as brilliant as the sun, or more brilliant than millions of suns. And he started telling them, this is Advaita Acharya. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, incidentally, himself. And he started naming different devotees of Lord Chaitanya. But then as they drew closer, Prataparudra Maharaj heard the sound that was coming from their mouths. It was the sound of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And then it was a very familiar sound because Kirtan was everywhere in his kingdom, but then he couldn't recognize it. He asked Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, what was the sound that was singing? And he said, this is Chaitanya Rashishti Prema Sankirtan. It's Prema Sankirtana. Beyond recognition, infused by Lord Chaitanya with Prema. That's why it's so unusual, so unparalleled. So the same holy name that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu infused with Prema, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, he weaved a garland of Prema and Nama into one garland, and he put that garland on the entire world. Of course, we know who actually did that garlands in the world. When we look at Srila Prabhupada's traveling, there's one devotee friend of mine who put together an animation. He showed Prabhupada's movements by a small dot on the map for the entire duration of his preaching in the West, starting in 1965. And he would go in a circle in the world here and there, busily wrapping around that garland of Krishna Prema combined with the Nama around the world. So he said, yes, this is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's gift to this world, Krishna Prema. And this very name that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu brought here from the spiritual world, Gulakera Prema Dhamma Harinama Sankirtana, we still have today very carefully handed down to us by Srila Prabhupada and his predecessors. Advaita Acharya continued, by my great fortune, you have just come to my home. Please do not juggle words, just begin eating and do not talk. He speaks a little bit sternly here with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they have a very interesting, humorous relationship. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu really wants to treat Advaita Acharya as a senior. That's why he follows his requests and his orders. But Advaita Acharya Prabhu sometimes doesn't like to be treated like as a senior, and he devises some tricks to get Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to feel angry at him or chastise him as a junior. And sometimes Lord Chaitanya, when he would come to the house of Advaita Acharya, he would have an arati plate prepared, and he would offer Lord Chaitanya different items. And then Lord Chaitanya patiently waited for him to finish, and then he would take the plate and he would offer the remaining items back to Advaita Acharya with the mantra, the special mantra, Yosi Sosi Namostute. Whoever you are, you are, and I offer my obeisances. And he would make funny sounds in his mouth. I don't know how it sounded, but it was very funny. And that's so they had fun together. So Nanda Advaitacharya, in his role of a strict and very hospitable grihastha, who is really trying to get his special guest to eat as much as, not as much as he wants, but as much as Advaitacharya wants. This is the trick of being a good guest, is to eat as much as the hosts want us to. And once Srila Prabhupada was visiting a home of a life member of ISKCON, and then his entourage was a very strict brahmachari, Giriraj Maharaj, Giriraj Das Brahmachari at that time. And he didn't take sweets. He was very strict, very austere, very thin. And as a matter of fact, when his parents came to Calcutta to check on their son, because they were worried about him rejecting a very lucrative career as a lawyer, they were very wealthy, and they came, father and mother came to Calcutta to try and, as the last attempt, to try and encourage their son to go back home. Srila Prabhupada met with them, and they were very impressed with Prabhupada, his intelligence, his aristocracy, his very special aura around him, so much that the father of Giriraj told him, Giriraj later on, your spiritual master, I don't know who he is, but he's a great man. He's a great man. I can see that. But the mother was very upset seeing Giriraj very lean and thin. And she expressed her concern to Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada said, he's a bit too thin. I'll take personal care of him. And I make sure that he eats enough paneer, enough rasagullas, enough highly nutritious food. Right? And then Giriraj Maharaj, once he went to preach to South India, and he stayed in the house of one very hospitable and very affectionate life member, very pious Vaishnavas. And they had a deity, had deities in their home, and they would offer everything to Krishna, and they would feed Giriraj for a month or so. And then he came back to Calcutta, and Prabhupada saw him having gained some weight. And what he told Giriraj Maharaj was telling us in the class, go right away immediately and take a photograph of yourself and send to your mom. Immediately. That was his instruction. So she feels pacified. But on that occasion, Giriraj was adamant he wouldn't take any sweets, but the head of the house, who was a very elderly gentleman, he really took a liking in Giriraj. He really wanted to feed that young effulgent brahmachari some rasagullas. So he would come from the right side, he would come from the left side, he would try to somehow sneak a rasagula on his plate, but Giriraj was very watchful, and he wouldn't let that man do that. Right? He didn't want to take any sweets, and he is not allowed, he didn't want to leave any remnants on his plate as well. So seeing that tussle between the two, Srila Prabhupada leaned over to Giriraj and whispered into his ear. He said, can I take one sweet to make an old man happy? That was his, can I take just one sweet to make an old man happy? And Giriraj relented, and he took it, or like that. So Acharya, Advaita Acharya, in his role as a host, he was getting a little bit stern or strict with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, telling him, okay, just give up your sannyas pretense, just eat, and do not talk. Okay, so next is 78. Upon saying this, Advaita Acharya supplied water to the two lords so they could wash their hands. The two lords then sat down and smiling began to eat the prasadam. And now an interesting part starts, 79. Actually, when I spoke with Yadubara Prabhu yesterday, I was trying somehow to request him to speak today, because for one, I would really love to hear from Yadubara Prabhu. Yadubara Prabhu and Vishaka Devi, they're the ones, actually they're, at least for us, for our generation, they are our eyes to see Srila Prabhupada. There are some other devotees, photographers of Srila Prabhupada, videographers, who, because of by whose mercy we now can see videos of Srila Prabhupada and see his photographs. But I recently reread, I already read it before, and I reread it again, that wonderful book called 5 Years, 11 Months, and a Life Full of Unexpected Love. How many of you have read that book? Oh. I read it twice, right? So it's a wonderful book. It's so wonderful, as if you're walking through the path of Vishaka Devi with Srila Prabhupada. She started off and she describes herself with very stark honesty and She doesn't hide anything about her life, basically. And incidentally shown, she doesn't hide anything from the life of Yadubara Prabhu together. And she describes how she transformed because of Srila Prabhupada's association from a avowed atheist and feminist and someone who didn't want to accept anyone for an object of worship. She became a devoted and faithful loyal disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and how she put to very good use her skills as a photographer. She was an accomplished photographer, and she was on the way to making a wonderful career. She had already had offers from different journals and magazines for her photography. And when she came to Prabhupada, because somebody told them, Yadubara Prabhu and Vishaka Devi, that Swami Prabhupada, he knows everything about India, and they had an assignment to depict India's rural life. So they came with their cameras to Mumbai, and they met Prabhupada in his quarters in a Akash building. And the first thing Prabhupada told them, after he learned what their purpose was in India, he said, "Oh, you're foreigners, you don't know the local language. They will cheat you here, and they will steal your cameras." And interestingly, those few words spoken by Prabhupada immediately changed the heart of Vishaka Devi. She saw him as genuine, very human, compassionate, and relatable saint. And then that was the first transformational experience of associating with Srila Prabhupada. And they went on, and now because of their mercy, we could see Prabhupada through their eyes. Vishaka Devi even remembers in her book when she was at the installation ceremony of Krishna Balaram, and one prominent sannyasi at that time was blocking her view, and she didn't shy away. She just came forward and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Would you, Maharaj, just move over? If you stay here, then you will be the only one to see Prabhupada offering arati. But if you move over, everyone else will see." Because I have a photograph. So she did that. So there's an interesting feature about Lord Srila Prabhupada's videos, which has a very deep philosophical foundation. And I'm sure Yadubara Prabhu could verify that observation. Because you have how many frames a second? 25, usually 24, 25 frames a second. Videos are usually, actually, still images just changing very rapidly, in a rapid sequence, and we see it as if it's a moving video. But I had a friend, a devotee, who was a very expert video editor, and he was requested to edit a clip of Srila Prabhupada's video. And he went down, parsing that video down to a single frame. And then he came to me, sharing his amazement. He said, "I couldn't find a single frame where Prabhupada's face was kind of contorted or distorted or not photogenic. In every single frame, 25 times a second, Prabhupada's face was perfectly composed." And there is a verse in the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which I don't have time to share with you right now, which explains the reason why great devotees, even if you go down to a split second, they're perfect and transcendently attractive. So, sit down at the Nitya Prasadam. Nityananda Prabhu said, now we have that humorous exchange. Prabhupada also had humorous exchanges with his disciples over Prasadam. Like Yamuna Devi, another great cook, when Prahlananda Maharaj read the other day Prabhupada's instruction in the purport that I hope my disciples will take note of these nice preparations and put them into cookbooks. Yamuna Devi did just that. And she was cooking for Prabhupada in Vrindavan. Once his sister Bhavatarini, or Pishima as she was known affectionately, came to visit Prabhupada, and Bhavatarini looked like Prabhupada in the female body. One disciple of Prabhupada, if lady saw him for the first time, her for the first time, she was surprised. Why did Prabhupada put on a white sari? It was hers, because the face looked just like Prabhupada's, and she wore those thick rimmed glasses and the nose and the lips and everything, even the height. Anyway, she came, and she really loved Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was also very reciprocal with her, even though she would cut jokes at her expense sometimes, taking advantage of her not knowing the English language. He would joke, "Oh, look at how fat she is. She says it's water, but I say it's fat." So she came to visit Prabhupada in Vrindavan and Yamuna Devi cooked for both of them in a traditional Bengali style. And Prabhupada had a special language of gestures showing how he rated Yamuna's cooking. They have a special language of gestures. If he would just pat his stomach, like that, his belly, that would mean it's like third class. Good, but kind of on the lower level. And if he pat his chest, rub his chest, that would mean it's okay, it's good. If he would make a cutting motion across his throat, that means it's excellent. And then if he would just wave his hand above his head like that, means like beyond words. It's beyond exceptional. It's first class. But on that particular occasion, Prabhupada ran out of gestures. And when Yamuna came into the room after serving them prasadam, she saw that the katoris, the small bowls that prasadam had been served in, they were all piled up in a pyramid on Prabhupada's plate, all empty, all of them. And from the larger to the smaller, they were all piled up in a pyramid. And Prabhupada looked at her, and with a flick of his finger, he would just knock them down, like a knockout prasadam or something like that. He was very happy. So they have that humorous exchange with Yamuna and Bhavatarani. So now we have just a few minutes actually. We'll run through the verses. Yeah, I was talking about Yadubara Prabhu. When I approached him, asking him to please speak on these verses, he said, I'll struggle to restrain my laughter reading these verses because it's so funny. So that was his excuse not to give class on these verses. So Nityananda Prabhu said, after all that restraint and composure of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Nityananda Prabhu said, I have undergone fasting for 3 days continuously. Today I hope to break my fast. Although Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was thinking that the quality of food was enormous, Nityananda Prabhu on the contrary thought it not even a morsel. He had been fasting for 3 days and had greatly hoped to break fast on that day. Indeed, he said, although I am invited to eat by Advaita Acharya, today is also a fast. So small a quantity of foodstuffs will not even fill half of my belly. Maharaj, with your permission, I'll just finish reading these verses, 5 verses. Advaita Acharya replied, Sir, you're a mendicant traveling on pilgrimages. Sometimes you eat fruits and roots, and sometimes you simply go on fasting. I'm a poor Brahmana, and you have come to my home. Please be satisfied with whatever little foodstuffs you have received, and give up your greedy mentality. So Lord Chaitanya, he was encouraging him to eat more and more. And Nityananda they have a different, very humorous relationship, very comic. Lord Nityananda Prabhu replied, whatever I may be, you have invited me, therefore you must supply as much as I want to eat. Text 84. His Divine Grace Advaita Acharya, after hearing the statement of Nityananda Prabhu, took the opportunity presented by the joking words and spoke to him as follows. In text 85, it's got a sizable commentary, but with your permission, Maharaj, I'll leave the commentary for the next devotee to speak on Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maybe we could start with that next time. Advaita Acharya said, you reject Paramahamsa, and you have accepted the renounced order of life just to fill up your belly. I can understand that your business is to give trouble to Brahmanas. And then it goes on from there. They start arguing back and forth, and eventually gets to the point that Nityananda Prabhu, exasperated, he takes a handful of rice and throws on the floor in front of him. And when it touches the body of Advaita Acharya, he erupts in ecstasy and starts dancing. But all ends well. After that prasadam, of course, Nityananda Prabhu says, for the offense of not feeding me properly, you have to invite 100 sannyasis to feed them. And Advaita Acharya says, after today's visit, I don't think I will invite any sannyasis ever at all again. I'll never again invite another sannyasi after you. But then after that, they all start chanting and dancing in ecstasy in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Prema Sankirtana. So I'll stop here with your permission. I don't think we have time for questions, but if Maharaj or other Prabhupada's disciples or senior devotees have any comments or corrections, please feel free. Am I allowed to go over time? Because it's already, now we have spoken about prasadam, and it would be cruel and inconsistent to prevent devotees from going to put into practice what we've just read.
Actually, class mentioned earlier I've often wondered, is Ramachandra Puri in Krishna Lila was Jatila with Radharani's mother-in-law, and very critical and, dealings with Krishna, etc. So I'm wondering, is this Leela, or is this personality actually critical and he's just sort of in that situation, just adds spice somehow or other?
Maybe Prahlada Maharaj would like to answer this question. I have something to say on it, but after you, Maharaj.
It's all Leela.
You have it. It's all Leela.
Yeah, it's all Leela. I mean, even Jatila is not a demon. She loves Srimati Radharani. But she wants to protect her. She also wants to protect Krishna. So and besides that, her son, who he loves, is an expansion of Krishna. It's these shadows. It's because of reality. I mean, we know that, first of all, in our conditioned state of life, when we start thinking we can understand these things, you have to be on the transcendental platform to actually know what's going on. Otherwise, we're just trying to see things from our materialistic perspective. Even Ramachandra Puri, I mean, how many of us are in Chaitanya Lila?
Thank you, Maharaj. Well, of course, as Srila Prabhupada explains in the 8th chapter of Madhya-lila, he says, we shouldn't think that Lord Chaitanya's associates, Nitya-siddhas, they're all left in the past. They came with him, they went with him, and now we're stuck with sadhana-siddhas, or just sadhakas. He said that whoever takes part in Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtana movement must be considered a Nitya-siddha to this day. So those of you who do take part, which is basically all of you, as long as we participate, we're supposed to be considered by according to Prabhupada's instructions. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also spoke. There is a very wonderful statement by him. He said, if somebody just worships Lord Chaitanya at home, then he is a Gaura Bhakta. But if somebody lives by the mood of separation from Krishna that Lord Chaitanya manifested, which drove his Sankirtana movement, his mood, then he is a Gaura Samgi, and he or she are Nitya-siddhas. As long as they live by that desire of Lord Chaitanya to relieve the separation from Krishna of all the conditioned souls, like that. But what I wanted to add to that, thank you very much, Maharaj, for your response, was Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu was once asked about a very similar question. And he said, the only demons in Srimad Bhagavatam or in Chaitanya Lila are us reading them. Us reading the pastimes. They're meant for us, just like on the stage, actors put on a Lila or play, and the audience is supposed to get transformed by the display of their artistic abilities. In the same way, Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita are meant for us to become devotees. And as Maharaj said, we're not in Chaitanya Lila yet, but we can enter it through reading and hearing, and most importantly, preaching Chaitanya Lila to others. I hope, Maharaj, it's correct.
Well, we have to be careful when we hear about Krishna's pastimes. We actually think that some ordinary person is involved. Because, to give an example, when Uttama tried to climb on the lap of his father Uttanapada and his mother Suruchi, complained and therefore offended Dhruva Maharaj. Later on he became a pure devotee. But because Suruchi had offended Dhruva Maharaj and Uttama was also involved, therefore later on, although they weren't pure devotees at the time, because they became pure devotees later, they had to burn in a forest. Well, Uttama got killed by the Yakshas, and Suruchi had to burn in a forest fire, so it's careful dealing with devotees, especially in Chaitanya Lila.
Yeah, thank you. Can we stop here? Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantha Raja, Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita Grantha Raja ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Premanande.